Our first keynote is about the development ecosystem. It's around the issues that exist and the organisations that work to solve them. Seth's going to do some wonderful desk hopping. And as Alex said, Seth is our first speaker. He's the International Programme and Policy Director for World Vision. We're also lucky enough to have him as part of our Board of Directors of Engineers Without Borders. And his wisdom is greatly appreciated on that. So he supervises all of the engineering and development work done by World Vision in partnership with over 20 countries. He began his career with an associated existence between humanitarian engineering and various roles in different countries before taking up his current post. So please welcome Seth.
I'm hoping I have a presentation or something.
Example, if you need help.
I was asked to speak on international development trends, and it's such a vast subject. I thought, how on earth can I do this? One of the things that I've been very privileged to do over the last few months is really be reflecting quite a bit on the period of the Millennium Development Goals, and then of more interest to a certain extent is the period of the post-2015 what's called sustainable development period of time. And so I thought, seeing I was an academic institution, I could actually do this in the persona of being a teacher and doing a report. You never used to get reports to school. So I thought I would kind of have a look at the Millennium Development Goals. We are just a very short time until the period from 2000 to 2015 is over. And just have a look and see how we've got on. I mean, this is kind of preparatory to looking forward to see what would we be doing in the next 15 years, which is our next period of time we're looking at. So I thought, let me just use the report card thing and go through them. Now, for those who may not know, that in the year 2000, the leaders of the world gathered for a Millennium meeting. And the idea was to see what could be different in this new period of time. And these are some of the words that come from their statement. We recognise that in addition to our separate responsibilities to our individual societies, we have a collective responsibility to uphold the principles of human dignity, equality and equity at the global level. As leaders, we have a duty, therefore, to the world's people, especially the most vulnerable, and in particular, the children of the world, to whom the future belongs. Then they make a statement which I find very hard. We will spare no effort to free our fellow men and women and children from the abject, dehumanising conditions of extreme poverty, to which more than 1 billion of them are currently subjected. We are committed to making the right to development a reality for everyone and to freeing the entire human race from want. Now when you think about who was saying this, it's a powerful statement. This is the whole world. The leaders of the whole world made this statement. And the phrase which has been echoing in my mind when I think about this, we will spare no effort. We will spare no effort. And this was not done by some terrorist holding a gun to the heads of the world leaders. They said this freely and openly as something that they were going to do. So let's kind of just have a look and see how the effort went. Now these are one of the goals: to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, to halve between 1990 and 2015 the proportion of people whose income is less than $1 a day. So how did we go? My colours change. I'm kind of a bit colour confused, so if I say the wrong colour, just bear with me. The first column is the number of people who were suffering from extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa. This is the target, and this is where they reached. in 2005. Yeah, so 2008. It's kind of interesting that sub-Saharan Africa, and an area that we don't think of too much, is the Pacific, in terms of being an area of extreme need. We just recently, Mission chaired a panel of politicians talking about poverty in paradise. And we often, if you think of extreme poverty, your mind immediately goes to Africa. Very rarely does it go to our closest neighbours. And yet, in fact, some of our closest neighbours are some of the least advanced in development in the world. So how have we gone here? What's the grade here? I'd like to give this a grade F, because I think we failed. I mean, look, where the targets are. This is the least developed countries. Caribbean's not doing too badly, but frankly, have we halved the proportion of people whose income? No, we haven't. We didn't reach there. So how do we go with education? This is not too bad. If you look at it to start with, in fact, I gave it a grade C. But one of the things that concerns us is in World Vision, we're a child-focused organisation, is that kids being enrolled in school is not enough. Actually, them rocking up to school doesn't mean that they're getting educated. And we're actually so much more interested in the literacy. Can kids read, write, count? Rather than just being enrolled in school. And that's a whole different subject. But have they reached, they've done better in enrollment? Yes, they have. But enrollment into what? I mean, one of our goals is that children should be educated for life. In other words, they should finish school so they can become productive citizens. And I think there's a huge distance there in many parts of the world. What about this one? Promote gender equality and empower women. This is one of the ones where I think there's a great deal. I think in terms of the gender development goals, we have done very poorly. There is still a huge amount of need for dealing with gender issues. This is one which really does concern me. I mean, the goal was very radical, to reduce by 2/3 the under 5 mortality rate. The thing which is so sad about this one is that they're really simple things that we need to do to actually achieve this. This is not a complex goal. It's simple stuff like clean water. It's simple stuff like universal vaccinations. It's simple stuff like looking after the first 1,000 days of a child's life from conception. You know, if you do that, you can change these things. And it's simple stuff like deworming. It's just, you know, and we're talking cents for every child to actually achieve this. It's not, we're not talking vast amounts of money. Give them an F on that one. What about improving maternal health? Give them an F on there too. Still too many women are dying in childbirth. You know, in places like Afghanistan, it's really, really dangerous to give birth to children. It shouldn't be so. So many women across the world still give birth without any them. And we should have done better than this one. Combat AIDS. This was a hard one to actually get some figures on, but look at this, this kind of really annoys me. HIV/AIDS orphans in 2001 and 2009. And people wonder about, you know, HIV/AIDS back in the day, when I first started doing development work in the 1980s, everybody, there was gazillions of money being chucked at HIV/AIDS, simply because the international community was afraid that AIDS was going to move out of the developing world into the developed. They were trying to protect themselves in a way. And it's kind of gone off the radar. People don't talk about HIV/AIDS very much anymore, but it is still a huge impact in the world. And we still have done very well on that. I think that's an F. This next one as well, a little better. our safe drinking water, we're doing better in that space. Although, when you look at Oceania, it's got a long way off the target. The one that really does concern me the most is this one. When the Millennium Development Goal said we will spare no effort, all the developed countries of the world signed up to this huge amount of money, which is 0.7% of our gross national income. And this is the greatest failure. Look where the total sits. And people say to me, being in the development, oh, you know, it doesn't work, you know, you work. We've never invested enough in it. And this kind of really concerns me, that because in 2015, the world's leaders will meet again, and they will make another promise. And there's nothing worse than making a promise that you don't deliver. I spent a lot of my life in Tanzania and speak Swahili fluently. In Swahili, there's a saying which says, "Ahadi ni deni," which means a promise is a debt. A promise is a debt. And when our pollies go to the UN General Assembly and they sign up yet again to another one of these things, are we going to actually sign up to something that we're going to keep? I mean, it's a disgrace to the international community. I get a bit radical on this stuff. It's a disgrace to the international. Why would we say that we're going to do 0.7? Why would we say that if we just were not prepared to? Why say we will spare no effort? And I'm saying that because I think in the 2015 to the 2030, we need to have a goal which we're actually going to keep. If we're going to say we're only going to put 0.3% in, let's just say it. You know, let's be honest, and I think with our, you know, because otherwise to say something that we just simply don't keep is global hypocrisy on a horrendous scale. It's an F. Now, this looks a bit brilliant. We have made a lot of progress in these 15 years, but where would we have been if this number was up here? Where would we have been? What difference would it have made? Now, what would that mean for New Zealand? Well, the Council for International Development did the numbers on this, and it's shocking how much money New Zealand would have to spend. Do you know how much we'd have to spend? The cost of a latte per New Zealander per week. Oh, we couldn't do that. It's just too much. It's taking money out of our... What's a latte per New Zealander? For us to get to 0.7. Oh, that's ridiculous, isn't it? Could we all do without one latte? Or cappuccino? Make a choice. But, you know, what we're talking here is not huge. It's not something that would cripple us. It would only be the difference is we actually keep our promise. Which to me actually makes, you know, as a country we should be proud that we keep our promises. There are some countries that are doing the 0.7. And guess what? They're not going bankrupt. They're just making and keeping their promise. And I would hope that we can encourage in this year with the next few weeks in which we're all thinking about elections and stuff, we're going to be asking our politicians, you know, if you have an interest in global things, and that's why you're here, sure. Are we going to keep our promises on this? Will New Zealand sign up to something that they believe? Will we follow that Swahili proverb that a promise is a debt? If you promise something, you should do it. Don't promise what, you know, and for us in development, I never ever, when I go into a community, I never promise something that I can't deliver. You shouldn't do that, it's not fair ever to do that. So looking back, a mixed goal, a mixed reaction. And this is why I look forward to this 2015 period of time, and I hope that we won't just start off with a hiss and a roar, but that we will actually take that Swahili proverb and only promise what we will deliver. Now I was thinking, what do I say for the period moving forward? And this is if I was a school teacher, this is what I would say. This student is underachieving and should apply more effort if he wishes to succeed in the future. will be monitoring his progress more closely in the coming term. And that's the report that I'd send back to the global community. And I think we should do this seriously. We should be holding our governments to account for this very mixed result. Now, I was thinking of our present life, and I was thinking about who I was speaking to, and I thought it's really hard sometimes to make sense of what is happening in the world. And I thought I'd do something which is not, it's not a complete analysis of the world, but I just thought it might be interesting to a bunch of engineers. I read this recently in one of the high-level panel reports, and it kind of has become a filter through which I look at things. Many of the world's conflict zones in Sahel, the Horn of Africa, Syria and Western Asia are dryland regions already suffering from rising hunger caused by falling rainfall, intersecting with rising populations. Conflicts are typically interpreted as crises of politics and religion. Yet we should have no doubt these conflicts are also being stoked by droughts, famines, mass migration, and other symptoms of economic, social, and environmental unsustainability. So I thought, let's just have a look at a few about the conflicts and look at the resource side of it, which is an area that I think engineers would be interested in. The first one is most probably one of the, it was the Arab-Israeli War in 1967. And all those of us of my generation, this was kind of one of those key moments. It was actually one of the moments during the Cold War in which the US and the Russians were ready to go head-to-head over this war. Now, one of the things that nobody kind of knows is this, actually here. This here was the cause of a significant cause of the 1967 war, was the fact that before the war, if you look here, this is their main water source, the river from Lake Galilee, down here the River Jordan to the Dead Sea. Now, prior to the war, the watershed was almost entirely in enemy hands. And so what did Israel do? They built this aqueduct running down here, draining the lake and bringing water down here. Now, Jordan and Syria could see that this was a serious problem to them. And so they went to war. After the war, what did Israel do? They occupied the Golan Heights. Now, it is a strategic high-level area, but it's also a watershed. West Bank, another watershed. So much about what's actually happening in Palestine and Israel and that today. It's actually, there's all sorts of other things, and it's not the only one, but it's really interesting to see what the impact of water is on the conflicts that we have worldwide. Until just when I was actually researching this here, I'd never actually known that water was the thing that was behind the 1967 war, was a significant factor. Not the only factor, and I'm not saying that water's everything, but it's just interesting when you peel back all the other crap, you see that some of these basic things are a very key thing here. I've had the privilege of going to many different places, and one of the places that I've been to was Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein. And I went to the south of the country, and for 6,000 years, the Marsh Arabs lived in an amazing kind of marshland area. Fishermen, living, even when I went there, this was the house that I visited, the local sheikh, and it was still built of reeds and things. But this was what Saddam Hussein did to the marshlands. He drained them because the Marsh Arabs were in opposition to Saddam Hussein. It's kind of like it's a crime against humanity using water as a weapon. Quite extraordinary, really. It was just this amazing piece of environmental change that he made for one purpose, and it was subduing the Marsh Arabs. And we went in there and we thought, what do you do with people who are literally high and dry? There's no other term for them. They were stuffed. They were fishermen. They had boats sitting outside their houses with no water for miles because water had been, or the withdrawal of water is seen as a weapon. This was something, I found out about this recently, which is, it's almost Indiana Jones stuff. Underneath these four countries, there is something called the Nubian sandstone aquifer. It's a water resource with the equivalent of 300 years of the River Nile's output. It's a vast thing. There's not a lot of writing about it, but it's kind of pretty interesting. The thing is, it's fossil water. In other words, it can never be replenished. One of the things that happened was Gaddafi started to mine this water on a major scale. And people like NASA are watching this aquifer because it is the largest fossil deposit of water in the world. And it's under some of the dodgiest countries. You know, and so it's more priceless than anything else. It's more priceless than oil. And it can never be replaced. And I sometimes, I have no information on this, but I just wonder how much of the Arab Spring and the toppling of Gaddafi's regime was actually related to the fact that he was really mining this in a big way. And he was taking the water out of there. I'm sure that it was a factor. This is kind of really interesting on the Syrian conflict. At the moment, there's a stoush which no one reads in the newspaper, but that Turkey is threatening to close off the water running through the Euphrates. The Euphrates is kind of the key river here. So Turkey has got big dams up here, and it's threatening to stop the water. ISIS, that wonderful group, call it an act of war. If Turkey does this, and they're likely to want to invade Turkey if they do this. It's very interesting that this caliphate that they talk about is actually a string of towns along the Euphrates. It's kind of all about water. Well, it's not all about water, but it's a kind of a key thing. And it's interesting, why did the people all of a sudden rise against Assad? It was because they had some of the worst droughts. 60,000 farmers had to leave their farms because their farms were no longer sustainable. And they moved to urban areas, and so you had this group of disaffected people there, and so you start the regime thing. It's interesting that Syria uses 99.8% of its renewable water. Israel uses over 100%. It's nicking water from other people. And it's kind of interesting that a lot of the discussion is about Shias and Sunnis. There's another way of looking at these guys too, and that is upstream and downstream, because the Sunnis live upstream and the Shias live downstream. It's just kind of interesting when you look at a conflict like Syria and this whole area, and you just put another resource filter on it. It takes a lot of the, why would the Sunnis and the Shias hate each other? Well, you know, when one group can control the water and can actually, and the Shias in the south know what it's like to have water deprived of them. You know, the hatred that develops, because it's about life. So it's kind of quite an interesting, water is such a powerful force, and I think that for the challenge for us as humanitarian engineers is when we engage in water projects, we will increasingly have to use a methodology which we call the do no harm framework. Because an engineering or a development actor can either exacerbate conflict or mitigate conflict, depending on how they do their work. I know when I was in South Sudan working there, the UN, we put in a thing for a school, and they gave us only one school, but I had two clan areas which were warring, and so I refused the school. I said, you either give me two schools or no schools, because I can't build one. Because if I build only one school, and I build it in this area, the other tribe will think I'm their enemy because I didn't build a school for them. And if I build a school in the middle, no one will use it because both tribes are at war. And so please give me two schools so that I can build one in that community and one in this. Because that's the only way to mitigate the conflict. And when you're doing water, you're actually doing one of the most powerful and the most dangerous substances around. So to, you know, if you're going to be humanitarian engineers, you actually have to understand politics, because if you don't, you can create mayhem, absolute mayhem, by just going in and doing fantastic engineering, but you haven't figured out the impact of the investment on people around you. It's a shame, but water's not just a resource to be utilised, it's a weapon to subjugate minorities, and it's extremely political. So when you've finished your engineering degrees, maybe you need to, or you may need to add in some politics into the paper. Our challenge as Engineers Without Borders is to uphold the rights of all to equitable access to this basic state.